Part 2, Chapter 1. After the scene with his wife, Pierre left for Petersburg. At the Torzhok post station, either there were no horses or the postmaster was unwilling to supply them. Pierre was obliged to wait. Without taking off his outer clothing, he laid back on the leather sofa, put his big feet in their thick boots on the table that stood in front of it, and sank into thought. Am I to bring in the portmanteaus? Shall I make up a bed? Do you want tea? The valet kept asking. Pierre did not answer. He neither heard nor saw anything. He had been deep in thought since leaving the last station, and was still pondering the same question, one so important that he took no notice of what went on around him, far from being interested in whether he reached Petersburg earlier or later, or whether there would or would not be a place for him to rest at that station. Compared to the thoughts that now occupied him, it was a matter of complete indifference whether he spent a few hours or the rest of his life there. His valet, the postmaster, and his wife, and a peasant woman selling Torzhok embroidery, all came into the room offering their services. Without removing his feet from the table, Pierre looked at these people over his spectacles, unable to comprehend what it was they wanted or how they could go on living without having solved the problems that absorbed him. He had been engrossed in these same questions ever since the day he returned home after the duel in the Solansky forest, and had spent the first agonizing, sleepless night. Only now, in the solitude of the journey, they assailed him with particular force. No matter what he turned his thoughts to, he always came back to these same questions, which he could neither solve nor cease asking himself. It was as if in his head the main screw that held his life together was stripped. The screw would neither go in nor come out, but went on turning in the same groove without catching it. Yet it was impossible to stop turning it. The postmaster came in, and obsequiously begged His Excellency to wait just a couple of hours, after which, come what might of it, he would let His Excellency have the courier horses. The man was patently lying and only wanted to get more money from the traveler. Is this good or bad? Pierre asked himself. Good for me, bad for the next traveler, and for the man himself unavoidable, because he has to eat. He told me that an officer had once given him a thrashing for letting a traveler have the courier horses, but the officer thrashed him because he had to get on as quickly as possible, and I shot Dolokhov because I considered myself injured, and Louis XVI was executed because they considered him a criminal, and a year later they killed those who had killed him, also for some reason. What is bad? What is good? What should one love and what hate? What does one live for, and what am I? What is life, and what is death? What power governs it all, he asked himself. And there was no answer to any of these questions, except the one illogical reply that in no way answered them, which was, you will die, and it will all be over. You will die and find out everything, or cease asking. But dying too was dreadful. The Torzhok peddler woman in a whining voice went on offering her wares, especially some goat-skin slippers. I have hundreds of rubles I don't know what to do with, and she stands there in her ragged coat timidly staring at me, thought Pierre. And what does she want the money for? As if that money could increase by so much as a hair's breadth her happiness or peace of mind. Can anything in the world make her or me less subject to evil and death? Death which ends all and must come today or tomorrow, at any rate in an instant, as compared with eternity. And again he turned the screw with the strip hat, and again to no avail. His servant handed him a half-cut novel in form of letters by Madame de Sousa. He began reading about the sufferings and virtuous struggles of a certain Amelia de Mansfield. And why did she resist her seducer when she loved him, he wondered. God could not have put her into a heart an impulse that was against his will. My wife, as she once was, did not resist, and perhaps she was right. Nothing has been discovered, Pierre said to himself. Nothing devised. All we can know is that we know nothing. and that is the acme of human wisdom. Everything within and around him seemed confused, meaningless, loathsome. Yet in this very repugnance to all his circumstances, Pierre found a kind of galling satisfaction. "May I make so bold as to ask your Excellency to make a tiny bit of room for this gentleman here?" asked the postmaster, entering the room and ushering another traveler detained for lack of horses. The newcomer was a thick-set, large-boned old man, with a sallow, wrinkled face and bushy gray eyebrows, overhanging bright eyes of an indefinite grayish color. Pierre removed his feet from the table and stood up and went to the bed that had been made up for him and lay down now, and then glancing at the stranger, who paid no heed to him but with a somber, weary air was laboriously taking off some of his outer clothing with the help of a servant. Keeping on a warm, nankeen-covered sheepskin coat, and with his felt boots on his thin, bony legs, the traveler sat down on the sofa and leaned his large head with its broad temples and close-cropped hair against the back of it, and looked at Busukov. Pierre was struck by his austere, intelligent, penetrating expression. He wanted to speak to the stranger, but by the time he had made up his mind to ask him a question about the roads, the traveler had closed his eyes and folded his shriveled hands, and one finger of which there was a large cast-iron ring with a seal representing a death's head. The stranger sat motionless, either resting or, as it seemed to Pierre, sunk in profound, calm meditation. His servant was also a sallow, wrinkled old man, without beard or mustache, not apparently because he was shaven, but because they had never grown. The nimble old servant was busily unpacking his master's canteen, setting out the tea things, and bringing in a boiling samovar. When everything was ready, the stranger opened his eyes, and after pouring out a glass of tea for himself, filled another for the beardless old man, and handed it to him. Pierre began to feel a sense of uneasiness, and the necessity, even the inevitability, of entering into conversation with the stranger. The servant brought back his empty glass turned upside down, and with a bit of nimble sugar beside it, and asked if anything more would be wanted. "No, give me my book." The servant handed him a book, which Pierre took to be a devotional work, and the stranger became absorbed in reading. Pierre contemplated him. All at once the stranger laid down his book, put a marker in the page, and closed it, and again shutting his eyes and leaning back on the sofa, he fell into his former attitude. Pierre was still looking at him, and had not had any time to turn away when the old man opened his eyes and fixed his stern, inexorable gaze on Pierre's face. Pierre felt confused and tried to avoid that look, but the bright old eyes drew him irresistibly. Chapter 2. "I have the pleasure of addressing Count Besakov, if I am not mistaken," said the stranger in a loud, measured tones. Without answering, Pierre looked inquiringly over his spectacles at the speaker. "I have heard of you, my dear sir," continued the stranger, "and of your misfortune." He seemed to emphasize the last word as if to say, "Yes, misfortune. Whatever you may call it, I know that what happened to you in Moscow was a misfortune." And he said, "You have my deepest sympathy, my dear sir." Pierre flushed, hurriedly took his feet off the bed, and leaned toward the old man with a forced timid smile. "I mention this not out of curiosity, my dear sir, but for graver reasons." He paused, still looking at him, and moved over on the sofa by way of inviting Pierre to join him. Though reluctant to enter into a conversation with this old man, Pierre involuntarily submitted to him, and went over and sat down beside him. "You are unhappy, my dear sir," the stranger continued. "You are young, I am old. I should like to help you as far as it lies in my power." "Oh yes," said Pierre with an unnatural smile. "I am very grateful to you. May I ask where you are traveling from?" The stranger's face was not friendly. It was even cold and austere, but in spite of this, both the face and the words of his new acquaintances were attractive to Pierre. "But if for any reason you feel averse to talking to me," said the old man, "you have only to say so, my dear sir." And he suddenly smiled in an unexpectedly tender and paternal way. "Oh no, not at all. On the contrary, I am very happy to make your acquaintance," said Pierre. And glancing once more at the stranger's hand, he looked more closely at his ring with his death's head, a Masonic symbol. Masonic symbol. "Allow me to ask," he said, "are you a Mason?" "Yes, I belong to the Brotherhood of Freemasons," said the stranger. looking deeper and deeper into Pierre's eyes. "And in their name and my own, I extend a brotherly hand to you." "I'm afraid," said Pierre, smiling and vacillating between the confidence inspired in him by the personality of the Mason and his own habit of ridiculing the Masonic creed, "I'm afraid I am very far from understanding. How shall I put it? I'm afraid that my way of thinking about the whole theory of the universe is opposed to yours, that we shall not understand each other." "I am aware of your way of thinking," said the Mason, "and this way of your thinking you speak of, and which seems to you the result of your own mental efforts, is the way the majority of men think, and is the invariable fruit of pride, indolence, and ignorance. Forgive me, my dear sir, but had I not been acquainted with you, I should not have addressed you. Your way of thinking is a sad delusion, just as I may suppose that you too are suffering under a delusion," said Pierre with a faint smile. "I shall never make so bold as to say that I know the truth," said the Mason, impressing Pierre more and more with the precision and firmness of his speech. "No one can attain to truth by himself. Only by laying stone upon stone, with the cooperation of all, through millions of generations, from our forefather Adam down to our own day, is the temple raised which is to be a worthy dwelling place for the Almighty God," said the Mason, and closed his eyes. "I ought to tell you that I do not believe in God," said Pierre, regretfully and with an effort, feeling impelled to speak the whole truth. The Mason looked intently at Pierre and smiled, as a rich man holding millions in his hands smiles at a pauper who has told him that he, poor wretch, had not the 5 roubles that would secure his happiness. "But you do not know him, my dear sir," said the Mason. "You cannot know him. You do not know him, and that is why you are unhappy." Yes, I am unhappy," Pierre assented, "but what am I to do? You do not know him, my dear sir, and consequently you are very unhappy. You do not know him, but he is here. He is in me. He is in my words. He is in thee. And even in those blasphemous words thou hast just uttered," said the Mason in a stern, vibrant voice. He paused and sighed, seemingly endeavoring to calm himself. "If he were not," he said softly, "you and I would not be speaking of him, my dear sir. Of whom have we been speaking? Whom hast thou denied?" he suddenly asked, with an exultant, vigorous authority in his voice. "Who invented him if he does not exist? Whence came your hypothesis of such an incomprehensible being, a being omnipotent, eternal, and infinitive in all his attributes?" He stopped and remained silent for some time. Pierre could nor did he wish to break the silence. "He exists, but to understand him is hard," the Mason resumed, not looking into Pierre's face, but straight before him, while his old hands, which in a state of inner excitation he could not keep still, kept rifling the leaves of his book. "If it were a man whose existence thou this doubt, I could bring him to thee, could take him by the hand and show him to thee. But how can I, an insignificant mortal, show his omnipotence, his infinity, all his mercy, to one who is blind, or to one who shuts his eye, that he may not see, may not understand him, and he may not see and understand his own vileness and depravity?" He paused again. "Who art thou? Why art thou? Thou dreamest thou art wise, because that thou could utter those blasphemous words," he said with somber, scornful irony. "Wilt thou art more obtuse and absorbed than a little babe who, playing with the parts of a cunningly contrived watch, dares to say that as he does not understand its use, he does not believe in the master who made it. To know him is hard. For ages, from our first forefather Adam to our own day, we have been striving for this knowledge, and are still infinitely far from the attainment of our aim in lack of our understanding. We perceive only our weakness and his greatness." Pierre gazed into Mason's face with shining eyes, and his heart thrilled as he listened to him, and he did not interrupt nor ask him questions, but believed with his whole soul what the stranger said, whether he was persuaded by the rational arguments of the Mason's word, or was convinced, as children are, by the tone of sincerity and authority in the vibrant voice which almost broke at times, or by those brilliant eyes grown old in that conviction, or by the calm firmness and certainty of purpose radiating from his whole being, and which particularly impressed Pierre by contrast to his own despondency and hopelessness. At any rate, he longed with all his soul to believe, and to believe, and he experienced a joyous feeling of solace, regeneration, and return to life. He is not apprehended by reason, but by life, said the Mason. I do not understand, said Pierre, feeling with a dismay of reawakening of doubt. He dreaded any want of clarity or any weakness in the Mason's argument, dreaded not believing him. I do not understand, he said, in what way human reason cannot attain the knowledge of which we speak. The Mason smiled his gentle fatherly smile. The highest wisdom and truth are like the purest essence we may wish to imbibe, he said. Can I receive this pure essence in an impure vessel and judge of its purity? Only by the inner purification of myself can I retain to some degree the purity of that essence I receive. Yes, that is so, said Pierre joyfully. The highest wisdom is not founded on reason alone, not on those worldly sciences of physics, history, chemistry, and the like into which intellectual knowledge is divided. The highest wisdom is one. The highest wisdom has but one science, the science of all, the science explaining all creation and man's place in it. In order to instill this knowledge in oneself, it is necessary to purify and renew the inner man, and so, before one can know, one must have faith and be made perfect. And for the attainment of this end there has been implanted in us the divine light called conscience. Yes, Pierre assented. Look with the eyes of the spirit into thy inmost being, and ask whether thou art content with thyself. What hast thou attained guided by reason alone? What art thou? You are young, you are rich, you are intelligent and well educated, my dear sir. And what have you done with all the blessings bestowed on you? Are you satisfied with yourself and your life? No, I arbor my life, Pierre declared with a frown. Thou arborest, then change it. Purify thyself, and as thou art purified, thou wilt gain wisdom. Look at your life, my dear sir. How have you spent it, in taking everything from society and giving nothing in return? You have been given wealth. How have you used it? What have you done for your neighbor? Have you given a thought to your tens of thousands of serfs? Have you helped them physically and morally? No. You have profited by their toil to lead a profligate life. That is what you have done. Have you chosen a post in the service where you might be of use to others? No. You have spent your life in idleness. Then you married, my dear sir, took upon yourself the responsibility of guiding a young woman through life, and what have you done? You have not helped her to find the path of truth, my dear sir, but have cast her into the abyss of deceit and misery. A man offended you, and you shot him, and you say you do not know God and arbor your life. It is hardly surprising, my dear sir. After these words, the Mason, as if tired by his long discourse, again leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. Pierre looked at the stern, impassive, almost lifeless face of the old man, and moved his lips without uttering a sound. He wanted to say yes, a vile it'll profligate life, but dared not break the silence. The Mason cleared his throat cautiously, as old men do, and called the servant. What about the horses? He asked, without looking at Pierre. Some have just come in, replied the servant. Will you not rest here? No. Have them harnessed. Can he really be going away and leaving me alone without having told me all, and without promising me help? Thought Pierre, getting up and beginning to pace the room with bowed head, glancing at the Mason from time to time. Yes, I never thought of it before, but I have led a contemptible, dissolute life. Though I did not like it, it was not what I wanted, Pierre reflected. And this man knows the truth, and if he wished to, could reveal it to me. Pierre wanted to say this to the Mason, but he dared not. The traveler, having packed the things with practiced old hands, buttoned up his sheepskin coat. When he had finished, he turned to Bezukov, and in a tone of polite indifference said, Where are you going now, my dear sir? I am going to Petersburg, answered Pierre, with an air of childish indecision. I am very grateful to you. I agree with all you have said. But do not think me altogether bad. I have wished with my whole soul to be what you have me be, but I have never met with help from anyone. Though I was myself most to blame for everything, help me, teach me, and perhaps I can. Pierre, could not go on. He choked up and turned away. The mason remained silent for a long time, evidently turning something over in his mind. Help comes only from God, he said, but such measure of aid as it is in the power of our order to give will be afforded to you, my dear sir. You are going to Petersburg. Give this to Count Wolarski. He took out his notebook and wrote a few lines on a large sheet of paper folded in four. Allow me to offer you one bit of advice. When you reach the capital, first of all, devote some time to solitude and self-examination, and do not return to your old way of life. And now I wish you a good journey, my dear sir, he said, seeing that his servant had entered the room, and success. The traveler was Isolov Alexeyevich Badezvin, as Pierre learned from the postmaster's register. Bazdeyev was one of the best-known Freemasons and Martinists even in Novikov's time. For a long time after he had gone, Pierre did not go to bed or ask for horses, but paced up and down the room, reviewing his dissolute past, and with a rapturous sense of being a new picture to himself his blissful, irreproachable, virtuous future, which appeared to him so easy. It seemed to him that he had been profligate only because he had somehow forgotten how good it was to be virtuous. Not a trace of his former doubts remained in his soul. He firmly believed in the possibility of the brotherhood of men, united in the aim of supporting one another in the path of virtue, and emphasized Freemasonry as such a brotherhood. Chapter 3. On reviewing Petersburg, Pierre informed no one of his arrival, went nowhere, and spent whole days reading Thomas à Kempis, whose books had been sent by him by some unknown person. One thing, and one thing only, he realized as he read this book: the hitherto joy of believing in the possibility of attaining perfection and the possibility of an active brotherly love among men, which Iosif Alexeyevsky had revealed to him. A week after his arrival, the young Polish Count Wolarski, whom Pierre had known slightly in Petersburg society, came into his room one evening with the same official and ceremonious air with which Doloskov's second had called on him, and having closed the door behind him and satisfied himself that there was no one else in the room, addressed Pierre. I have come to you with a message and a proposal, Count, he said, without sitting down. A person of very high standing in our brotherhood has applied for you to be received into our brotherhood before the usual term, and has proposed that I should be your sponsor. I regard it as a sacred duty to carry out this person's wishes. Do you wish to enter the Brotherhood of Freemasons under my sponsorship? Pierre was struck by the cold, austere tone of this man, whom he had almost always seen at balls, smiling amiably, and in company of the most dazzling women. Yes, I do wish it, said Pierre. Wolarski bowed his head. One more question, Count, he said, which I beg you to answer in all sincerity, not as a future Mason, but as an honest man. Gallant Homais, have you renounced your former convictions? Do you believe in God? Pierre thought for a moment. Yes. Yes, I believe in God, he said. In that case, began Wolarski, but Pierre interrupted him. Yes, I do believe in God, he said once more. In that case, we can go, said Wolarski. My carriage is at your disposal. Wolarski was silent throughout the drive. To Pierre's inquiries as to what he would have to do and how he should reply to questions, Wolarski said only that the brothers were more worthy than he would test him, and that Pierre had only to tell the truth. They drove in at the gates of a large house where the lodge had its quarters, and after ascending a dark staircase, entered a small lighted anteroom, where they took off their coats without the aid of a servant. From there they went into another room. A man in strange attire appeared at the door. Going up to him, Wolarski quietly said something to him in French, then went to a small wardrobe in which Pierre saw garments unlike any he had ever seen before. Taking a handkerchief from the wardrobe, Wolarski covered Pierre's eyes, catching his hair painfully in the knot as he tied it behind. Then he drew his face down, kissed him, and taking him by the hand, led him away. Pierre winced from the pain of his hair tied in a knot, and a shamefaced smile appeared on his face. He followed Wolarski with timid, uncertain steps, his arms hanging at the sides of his massive body, and his face puckered in a smile. After leading him for about 10 paces, Wolarski stopped. Whatever happens to you, he said, you must bear it with fortitude if you are firmly resolved to enter our brotherhood. Pierre nodded affirmatively. When you hear a knock at the door, you will uncover your eyes, added Williski. I wish you courage and success, he said, and pressing Pierre's hand, went out. Left alone, Pierre went on smiling in the same way. Once or twice he shrugged at his shoulders and raised his hand to the handkerchief as if wishing to take it off, but let it drop again. The 5 minutes he had spent with his eyes covered seemed an hour to him. His arms were numb, his legs almost gave way, and he felt extremely tired. He experienced a variety of the most complex feelings. He was afraid of what might happen to him, and he stood still more afraid of showing his fear. He was curious to know what was coming, and what would be revealed to him. But above all, he felt joyful that the moment had come when he would at last set out on that path of regeneration, and the actively virtuous life of which he had been dreaming ever since his meeting with Iosif Aladievskich. Loud knocks were heard at the door. Pierre uncovered his eyes and looked about him. The room was pitch dark, except in one place where a small lamp was burning inside something white. Pierre went nearer and saw that the lamp stood on a black table on which lay an open book. The book was the Gospel. The white object in which the lamp was burning was a human skull with its apertures and teeth. After reading the first words of the Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Pierre went around the table and saw a large open box filled with something. It was a coffin with bones in it. He was not in the least surprised at what he saw. Hoping to enter an entirely new life, absolutely unlike the old one, he expected everything to be extraordinary, even more extraordinary than what he was seeing. A skull, a coffin, the Gospel. It seemed to him that he expected all this, and even more. Trying to invoke his emotions, he peered around him. God, death, love, the brotherhood of man. He kept saying to himself, associating with these words vague but joyous conceptions of some sort. The door opened and someone came in. By the dim light to which Pierre had already become accustomed, he saw a rather short man. Evidently, having come from the light into darkness, the man paused. Then, with cautious step, approached the table and placed his small, leather gloved hands on it. This short man was wearing a white leather apron that covered his chest and the upper part of his legs. Around his neck was a kind of necklace above which rose a high white frill that framed his elongated face, lighted from below. For what are you come hither? Asked the newcomer, turning in Pierre's direction. At a faint rustle he had made, why have you, who do not believe in the truth of the light, who have not seen the light, come here? Why do you seek from us? What do you seek from us? Wisdom, virtue, enlightenment? At the moment when the door opened and the unknown man came in, Pierre felt a sense of awe and reverence such as he had experienced in childhood at confession. He felt himself in the presence of one who, though a complete stranger to his life, was yet his kin through the brotherhood of man. With bated breath and throbbing heart, Pierre moved toward the Rhetor, which was the title given by Freemasons to the brother who prepared the seeker for initiation into brotherhood. Drawing nearer, he recognized the Rhetor as a man he knew, Smilyanov, as it mortified him to think that the newcomer was an acquaintance. He would rather he were only a brother and a preceptor of virtue. For a long time Pierre could not utter a word, so that Rhetor had to repeat his question. Yes, I desire regeneration, Pierre articulated with difficulty. Very good, said Smilyanov, and immediately went on. Have you any idea of the means by which our holy order can help you in the attainment of your goal? Asked the Rhetor calmly and rapidly. I hope for guidance, help in regeneration, said Pierre, in a trembling voice and with some difficulty, due to his excitement and to being unaccustomed to speaking of abstract matters in Russian. What is your conception of Freemasonry? I understand Freemasonry to be the fraternite and equality of men with virtuous aims, said Pierre, feeling ashamed of the incongruity of his words with the solemnity of the moment. I understand. Very good, said the Rhetor quickly, apparently quite satisfied with this answer. Have you sought for the means of attaining your aim in religion? No, I consider it erroneous, and do not pursue it, said Pierre, so softly that Rhetor was unable to hear him, and asked him what he was saying. I was an atheist, answered Pierre. You seek truth for the purpose of observing its laws in your life. Therefore you seek wisdom and virtue. Do you not? asked the rhetor, after a momentary silence. Yes, yes, assented Pierre. The rhetor cleared his throat, crossed his gloved hands on his breast, and began to speak. Now I must reveal to you the principal aim of our order, he said. And if this aim concurs with your own, you may enter our brotherhood with profit. The first and chief aim of our order, the foundation on which it is confirmedly established and which no human power can destroy, is the preservation and bequeathing to posterity of a certain solemn mystery, which has come down to us from the most ancient times, actually from the first man, a mystery upon which perhaps the fate of mankind depends. But since this mystery is of such a nature that no one can know or profit by unless he is prepared by long and sedulous self-purification, not everyone can hope to discover it readily. Hence we have a secondary aim, that of preparing our members as far as possible to reform their hearts, to purify and enlighten their minds by those means that have been revealed to us by tradition through men and who have striven to attain this mystery, and thereby to render them capable of receiving it. By purifying and regenerating our members, we endeavor, thirdly, to improve the whole human race, offering it in our members an example of piety and virtue, and thereby striving with all our might to combat the evil that prevails in the world. Think on these things, and I will come to you again, he said, and went out of the room. To combat the evil that prevails in the world, Pierre repeated, and he pictured his future activity in that direction. He imagined men such as he himself had been 2 weeks ago, and mentally addressed an edifying exhortation to them. He imagined the debauched and unfortunate people whom he would help by word and deed, imagined oppressors whose victims he would rescue. Of the three aims enumerated by the rhetor, this last, that of improving mankind, particularly appealed to Pierre. The solemn mystery mentioned by the rhetor, though it excited his curiosity, did not seem to him essential, and the second aim, self-purification and reform, held little interest for him, since at that moment he felt a gratifying sense of being already entirely cured for his former vices and ready for only what was good. Half an hour later, the rhetor returned to communicate to the seeker the 7 virtues, corresponding to the 7 steps of Solomon's temple, which every Freemason should cultivate in himself. These virtues were: 1. Discretion, the keeping of the secrets of the order. 2. Obedience to the highest ranks in the order. 3. Morality. 4. Love for mankind. 5. Courage. 6. Generosity. 7. Love of death. Concerning the 7th, said the rhetor, try by frequent meditation on death to bring yourself to regard it not as a dreaded foe, but as a friend, that sets free from this grievous life the soul grown weary in the labors of virtue, and it leads the place of recompense and peace. Yes, that is as it should be, thought Pierre, when after these words the rhetor went away and left him to solitary reflection. That is as it should be, but I am still so weak that I love my life, the meaning of which only now is gradually being revealed to me. But the other 5 virtues that Pierre recalled, counting them off in his fingers, he already felt in his soul: courage, generosity, morality, love for mankind, and especially obedience, which he did not see so much as a virtue as joy. He now felt only too glad to be delivered from his own free will and to submit to those who knew the indubitable truth. He had forgotten the 7th virtue and was unable to recall it. The 3rd time the rhetor came back to him and asked Pierre whether he was still firm in his intention and resolved to submit to all that would be required of him. I am ready for everything, said Pierre. I must further inform you, said the rhetor, that our order teaches its doctrine not by word alone, but by other means, which may perhaps have a more potent effect on the sincere seeker after wisdom and virtue than mere verbal instruction. This chamber and the accoutrements you seek therein should already have conveyed to your heart, if it is sincere, more than words can say, and it may be that in the course of your initiation you will encounter an analogous method of enlightenment. Our order follows the example of ancient societies that made their teachings by means of hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphs, said the rhetor, is a designation for something not cognizable by the senses, which possess qualities similar to the things it symbolizes. Pierre knew very well what a hieroglyph was, but he dared not speak. He listened to the rhetor in silence, feeling from all He said that his ordeal was about to begin. "If you are resolved, I must proceed to your initiation," said the Rhetor, coming close to Pierre. "In token of generosity, I ask you to give me all your valuables." "But I have nothing here," said Pierre, assuming that he was being asked to give up all he had possessed. "What you have with you: watch, money, rings." Pierre hurriedly took out his purse and watch, but was a long time trying to get his betrothal ring off his fat finger. When this had been done, the mason said, "In token of obedience, I ask you to undress." Pierre took off his coat, waistcoat, and left boot, according to the Rhetor's instruction. The mason opened his shirt over the left side of his chest, and stooping down, pulled up the left leg of his trousers to above the knee. Pierre hastily began taking off his right boot also, and was about to tuck up the other trouser leg to save this stranger trouble, but the mason told him that this was not necessary, and gave him a slipper for his left foot. With a childlike smile of embarrassment, doubt, and self-mockery which appeared on his face in spite of himself, Pierre stood before his brother Rhetor, his arms hanging at his sides, his legs planted far apart, awaiting his further commands. "And finally, in token of sincerity, I ask you to close to me your chief passion," said the mason. "My passion? I had so many, Pierre." "That passion which more than all others compels you to stumble on the path of virtue," said the mason. Pierre paused, searching for an answer. "Wine, gluttony, idleness, sloth, impetuosity, anger, women." He went over his vices, mentally weighing them, not knowing to which of them to give preeminence. "Women," he said in a low voice, scarcely audible voice. The mason did not stir or speak for a long time after this reply. At last he went up to Pierre, and taking the handkerchief that lay on the table, again bound his eyes. "For the last time I say to you, turn all your attention upon yourself, bridle your senses, and seek blessedness not in passions but in your heart. The source of blessedness is not without but within us." Pierre had already felt with him this refreshing fount of blessedness, which now suffused his heart with joy and deep emotion. Thank you for watching. If you keep watching, I'll have more videos, so give it a thumbs up if you like this one, or a thumbs down. Leave a comment below, or subscribe, or do nothing. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.